Hi, anyone and everyone. Welcome to Have You Heard About This Case? My name is Sam.
And my name is Kelly. Today, I'm bringing you a case from abroad, more specifically, Queensland, Australia. We know we have some friends and listeners there, and I found a case that is truly, truly troubling. And this is not to say anything about Australia. This is to say something about the justice system writ large, because this case makes me very, very upset and angry. I'm going to try to be as measured as I can in this episode, but as our listeners know, I tend to get a little hot about some of these, and it is exactly this type. Today we are going to discuss the murder of Kelly Wilkinson. Before we get to this terrible subject, Sam, what is our question for today?
Well, this morning I watched the new Super Mario's movie, Super
Mm,
Mario Brothers,
okay.
and it was amazing. It
Really?
was so much fun, and it was so much better than I expected it to be. So, my question is,
Wow.
what is a movie or something you've seen recently that has been really good?
Oh, like a really good movie or a really good, oh,
Like,
let's think.
yeah, TV show, anything
Um,
like that.
okay,
Or just like an old favorite that you've rewatched or something.
I know. So, always, I've said here before, Schitt's Creek. Schitt's Creek, if you've not yet watched it, it is free serotonin. It is free dopamine. I beg you to go watch Schitt's Creek. It's so good. Lately though, there is a fantastic show that ties into a little something we were talking about off air right exactly before we started. There is a show streaming on HBO. It makes my voice tremble. On Max now. It's just Max.
Oh, yeah.
But it's
It's
called
still
We're
HBO in my
Here.
head.
Yeah,
I
HBO
love
Max.
We're Here.
Girl,
I
we're
love that
here.
show so
It
much.
You guys, if you haven't watched three queens go to a very remote town somewhere not familiar with drag queens, and they put on a show, and it is extremely emotional, and every single episode I cry.
Yeah, not surprising. It is such a good show. It's so heartwarming. But
Oh
it
my
also
god.
shows struggles of drag queens and
Mhm.
them being able to put on a show. And it's it's
Yes.
it's such a good show. It's Shangela, Eureka, and Bob the
Mhm.
drag queen are the three main queens who are
Yes,
in
and
it.
then I think there's a second season though, and there's another 3.
Is it another three for the second season? I know I'm not caught up. I think there's three seasons now.
Those were the 3 queens for season 1.
'Cause I know I'm like halfway through the second season. I haven't finished it yet.
Okay,
Um,
so season 4 doesn't premiere until April 26, 2024.
so it's coming
And
up.
so EW learns that hot off the presses, folks. EW says season 4 to replace 3 drag queens with new hosts: Sasha Velour, Jada Essence
Ooh.
Hall, and Priyanka.
Oh, that's a great trio as well.
Ugh, you guys, it is so it's like it's so emotional for me for the same reason I can't handle the emotions when I watch the new episodes of Queer Eye for the Straight Guy, because you see, like when Sam mentioned, you see the struggles of the queens, you also see the transformations of the people
Mm-hmm.
around them, and the transformations of those folks to accept from maybe even like outright hatred to acceptance is so beautiful that my tears, they just flow.
Well, like the whole premise of the show is to go into these small towns and put on a show and put a couple locals in drag and do a full makeover.
Yes.
And it's just really fun because some people who are doing it because they want to try something new and they think that drag is a future for them. Some people do it to do it for other family members to show acceptance. Some do it to just be more open and try something new.
Girl.
And it's so heartwarming. It's such a good show. And the queens are hilarious.
Oh my god, the queens do great. I loved when it was Shangela and Bob the drag queen and Eureka. I'm sure that they have other ventures that they have to move on to because
they're some of the biggest drag queens in the industry.
Yeah, exactly. Shangela is booked and blessed. Hallelujah. Bob won her season purse first, and Eureka O'Hara is also booked and blessed. So
yeah, I honestly wasn't a big fan of Eureka during the season. Like she's unbelievably talented. I just wasn't the biggest fan, but watching We're Here, I absolutely love her.
Totally changed. I didn't dislike her during her season.
It wasn't that I didn't dislike her, but it was just kind of like there were other people I had my eye on.
Yeah, I didn't dislike her, but during We're Here, oh my god, she is so able to connect with people. And if I'm not mistaken, Sam, correct me if I'm not, doesn't she do a lot of the makeup for each queen does their own person's makeup?
Yeah,
right?
I think each queen like takes on like a student essentially.
Yes.
So each queen is kind of in charge of outfits, makeup, the dance routine, kind of what music they're going to play, all of it. So she does it for the queen that she's working with that episode.
Yeah. I just remember that she worked with a lot of people who were really sort of emotionally fragile, and she was able to connect with them.
Yes.
And
in a very incredible way.
In a real way. It was so... was, and is so beautiful. It just makes me cry. So, even though it's on season 4, that's not exactly recent.
It started in 2020 and it got shut down mid-season. I do remember that because I was so upset.
Probably COVID.
It got shut down, like can't travel anywhere else. We're cutting the season episodes short.
Right, because COVID. There was an episode. Okay, this is not a We're Here podcast, but
we could do one though.
We could, y'all. There was an episode when Shangela was one of the queens who was training, quote unquote, training her person who has decided to try drag. And in this episode, it is a straight man. And he has decided to do drag for almost no discernible reason, just to prove that it's no big deal. Which I think is
Gettysburg? Is this when they're in Gettysburg?
Oh gosh, I don't remember the town, but I remember the moment
season.
On the fishing docks.
I remember because it was like Gettysburg was kind of a big deal. They came across a lot of struggles.
Yeah,
there.
Just big warning for y'all. He's a straight guy, and he's doing it just to show it ain't no thing, which I get. But he starts talking about what words we should use and what words we should not use. And this straight man uses the N-word to Miss Shangela. Not about her, but he says it as though it's something that could be ignored. And Miss Shangela sets him right immediately. Do you remember that?
Yeah, the whole show, it helps teach about drag culture because that's what they're doing. That's why they're going into some of these towns, is because these towns haven't shown openness to the culture. And they want to show them that, like, it's not dangerous. It can be fun. It can be a family thing. Right. It's not... Every like little glimpse you see into it is just a tiny picture of it, and we want to show you what we can do.
Yeah.
So you learn a lot watching the show as well.
It's not bad. It's not dangerous. It's just fun and showmanship and performing, and in the case of the show Drag Race, competing, but in this case it's more about the transformation of the human, and that is what makes me cry.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I highly recommend anyone to watch it.
Oh no, but now that this, should we get into some other things that make me cry?
Yes.
Okay, you guys, so I've already warned Sam. This is rough. I warned you in the intro. It's rough. It makes me angry, it makes me sad. You might hear me react a little emotionally during this episode. And that is not to be unprofessional. That is to just share the very real feelings that I had when I read Kelly Wilkinson's story. So, to begin, I even find the Guardian's initial newsline troubling. It reads, quote, "Murder victim Kelly Wilkinson repeatedly visited police in fear. They said she was, quote, cop shopping," unquote. Okay, right. This is the first time I've heard this this is the first headline that is shown when you search Kelly's name right now. I've never heard this term used before, though I think it's pretty self-explanatory. I don't know, Sam, would you agree?
Yeah, I'd say it's pretty self-explanatory.
Mm-hmm. And the idea that anyone, would have to visit the police multiple times in fear for their life makes me sad and angry. And that is why you'll hear maybe some emotional reaction from me. Because this did not have to happen. So today we're going to have to work backwards a bit, as this case was just pleaded in not 2 weeks ago.
Oh, recent.
Very, very recent. So the structure of how we go through the story might be a little bit different. My research just came out because the news is just hitting this sort of in a backward timeline. You know, typically we start with what we know about the victim, and I'm going to share that now. And then we sort of move through the story chronologically. For this, we're going to have to jump a little bit between the years 2021 and 2024. So, not 2 weeks ago. So, sadly, I know very little about Kelly's life prior to the brutal crime committed against her, though this could be due to ongoing sentencing, a potential inquest, and family privacy requests.
Yeah, I know that there's a lot of privacy awarded to the victims in Australia. I know for sure that's one thing that they take a lot of pride in.
Yes, and I completely respect that. And I
Absolutely.
did find her obituary, and I will share what the family has shared publicly, but because I saw they had shared so little publicly, I did not delve too much deeper because it seemed exactly like what you just said, that Australia has very, close privacy laws. And once you hear what this family has been through, I don't need to be digging through their life.
Mm-hmm.
Sam, you said that you'd heard a few cases out of Australia. Have you heard this one yet? Does anything ping for you?
Not yet. I know
Okay.
I've heard a few over the years, and unfortunately I just can't think of the names off the top of my head. So maybe as we get into it.
We see a lot of them, so.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that there's a potential inquest as well is probably keeping a lot of information under wraps.
Yeah.
I can say that She was the beloved mother of Bryce, Sophie, and Willow. She was the loving daughter of Reg and Karen, who preceded her in death. She was the much-loved sister of Danielle, Emma, and Natalie. The family shared in the public obituary, quote, "Kelly has touched the lives of so many people near and far. The family would like to express their sincere thanks to the community for all their love and support during this difficult time. A private ceremony has taken place. Kelly's warmth, smile, and witty humor will forever be remembered and fondly missed." End quote.
Yeah, it's beautifully written.
And all they have to share. That's all they have to share.
Mm-hmm.
How much they loved her. And they loved her so much that this family is calling for an inquest after they shared that their child visited the police, quote, almost every day before she was murdered by her husband in 2021.
Wow.
Yeah. So they loved her and they deserve this inquest, in my opinion. Kelly's final days before her murder are so tragic to report, as The Guardian describes her as, quote, frantic. She was in such fear that she visited multiple police stations pleading for help and that she was, quote, in danger. The official notes of the police read that she was, quote, cop shopping, end quote. The official notes. Yes, exactly. And I would just like to, again, highlight that. The official notes of the police read this. So, just over a week ago, on February 14th, 2024, Kelly's estranged husband, Brian Earl Johnston, who's 37 now, he was a former U.S. Marine, and he pleaded guilty to Kelly's murder. And now I'm going to need y'all to hang in here with me for what this monster has done. He has admitted to killing the mother of his 3 children in her Arundel home in Queensland, Australia, by tying her up and dousing her with petrol before setting her alight.
Oof.
She was just 27 years old.
Wow.
And he was 34 at the time of the crime.
So young.
So young. So young. And so horrific. And even worse. I'm sorry, everybody. This gets worse. Horrifically. She was murdered as her children played nearby.
Oof.
Quote, "One of the things that stands out to me in this case is that the kids were present at the scene. If the offender is wanting revenge, he might think a good way to do it is to do something in front of her children. The children being present, it can be a horrific way to take something from her," said Angela Lynch, the chief executive of Women's Legal Service Queensland.
And take something away from your children.
I agree. I can't. I told Sam as I was researching this case, I had to take a lap around my apartment after reading some of these articles because it's so barbaric. It's so monstrous. And I don't know if I've said this yet already, but again, this does not just happen in Australia. This happens in America as well. And the offender is an American, as he was a U.S. Marine. To become a Marine, you must renounce all other citizenship. This happens. And they were we'll get into it more later, just a little bit, but they were separating. They were estranged.
And that's unfortunately one of the most dangerous times.
Exactly. And it is exactly the same in Australia as it is here. It's just as dangerous there as it is here for women in domestic violence cases. Johnston pled out just a month before his scheduled trial in Brisbane Supreme Court via video link to one count of murder in the death of his estranged wife, Kelly. The murder occurred in a Gold Coast backyard. Gold Coast is an area of Australia that is sort of beach-like. It is along the northeastern area of the Australian continent. And
Okay.
it's yeah, we have a Gold Coast here in Chicago. So kind of similar. Beachy with high rises on the edge there, suburban outward, that sort of thing. And so this is in her backyard, they said, that he did this. Prosecutors had previously stated that the murder occurred at Kelly's home in Arundel. I did not look up which province that was because it did happen in the Gold Coast. Johnston is now awaiting sentencing after dragging the legal system through a 2-year murder trial. Justice Peter Callahan had to ask Johnston to repeat his plea of guilty when it was delivered in 2024, as it was not clear on the video link from custody. He is also charged with breaching a domestic violence order and violating his bail conditions. Ms. Wilkinson's family were in the court to hear the guilty plea.
So it was like he didn't really want to say guilty.
No, that's almost what I think. That's what I think. Like, the article said that it wasn't clear because of the video link. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, the video link. And there's a lot of things in this case like that, where you're like, interesting. So the video link just messed up. No, you were taking ownership. No. He muttered it probably, and the judge was like, excuse me? Can you plead in my court? Especially considering you're pleading out before you're even being tried, which means he's probably trying to avoid Australia's maximum sentence, which I'll talk about later. And he deserves. But I am glad that Kelly's family were in the courtroom to hear the guilty plea.
Good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, good. I'm not sure why he appeared via video link from custody. I don't know why he was not present in the courtroom. But we'll hear later his defense attorneys take issue as well with some lockdowns of the prison. So I'm not sure if perhaps they're still struggling with COVID and the prison systems there.
Yeah.
Or what? Yeah, I'm not sure. So Johnston was arrested just 2 blocks from the home. He had burns on his hands, and he was taken immediately to the hospital upon his arrest due to his condition after he was judged to be suffering from serious burns elsewhere. These burns were so serious he was put into a coma at the hospital, and he remained in a coma for several days before he was charged with his wife's murder.
Wow.
Yeah, I imagine they were waiting to see if he was going to survive.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'll mention it a little further down. Why not just talk about it now? He could not speak. So, like...
Oh, it was that bad.
It was that bad. He couldn't speak. And so he was in a coma. And I imagine they were waiting to see if he was going to survive. And then when they realized he would, they charged him with the murder. According to court documents, police later found a jerry can, 3 knives, a rope, duct tape, and other items in a bag at the property. For our non-Aussie listeners, a jerry can is it's one of those larger cans of gas that you can get at the store when you intend to buy more gasoline, maybe for like an at-home appliance like your lawnmower. Yeah, that sort of thing. They call them a jerry can. So one can assume that he may perhaps have used this to douse her. I did not find specifically if that is what he used, but I can't think of anything else that is...
It's an understandable assumption.
Yeah, I can't think of anything else. And, when you tip one of those... I can't think of a better word for it, so jerry can. When you tip one of those jerry cans, like, gas can splatter, like you filled your lawnmower.
Yeah, you have to be very gentle with it because the gas is so thin that it easily just bounces between the walls in such a small space.
So you could potentially very easily get it on you, which it seems as though Johnston did, and thus them taking him to the hospital upon his arrest. In court on February 14th, 2024, once again, I can't believe how, oh my God. In court, Johnston did not respond when asked if he wanted to say anything as to why sentence should not be passed upon him. Which, wow, my guy. Either he thought, I have no defense for this, or he thought, I am going to appeal this. I don't know. I mean, he is pleading guilty. But
he can't really appeal it if he's pleading guilty. It could have also been his lawyer just saying, like, don't say a word.
Exactly.
Like, you're already pleading, like, don't make it worse. Just don't open your mouth.
Because we'll hear defense barrister Kim Bryson said she had agreed with Crown Prosecutor Philip McCarthy that March 13th would be a suitable sentencing date. So this March 13th, we're going to find out how long Johnston gets for the murder of Kelly. And I also just would like to, in my cases overall, I prefer to refer to the perpetrator by their last name and the victim by their first name.
I do the same thing.
I hope that's not confusing for anyone. But that is what I'm doing. I barely remember this guy's first name. I don't want to remember his first name. He's a monster. And so they're saying both sides have agreed March 13th will be when he is sentenced. And his defense had to say, quote, there are some factual matters that remain contested in relation to the background of the relationship. We have been frustrated in our efforts to get out of the prison due to the lockdowns that have occurred, Bryson said. And I'll have more to say about this later. For now, McCarthy said that there was also a contest of facts over the motivation for Johnston murdering Wilkinson. So we're arguing the motivation of the murder of a 27-year-old mother of 3. She possibly had something to do with her own murder? Please. Please.
It sounds like, to me, they're not contesting the fact that he murdered her. They're contesting the fact of just why.
Exactly.
And in the end, does that matter?
Exactly.
I guess it depends on if they're going to do a different defense, but if he's pleading guilty, they're not taking that route.
Right. And I just said my first swear, everyone. I'm sorry. There are a couple written into this script, but I don't give a shit why you murdered a 27-year-old mother of 3. I give a shit how long you get in prison for that. And Justice Callahan said he could change the sentencing date if needed and ordered that Johnston remain in custody, which is where he belongs, but we'll find out now. We are going to start talking about what I believe is the real and true injustice here. So that's a skeleton of the crime.
Wait, so his lawyer's trying to get him out of prison after pleading guilty before his sentencing?
I have no idea.
That doesn't make sense to me.
It doesn't make sense to me either, but there is a weird bail system in Australia, and I go into that a little bit, and they might want one of the other bail options for him. However, I don't understand why you would fight the sentencing date when your client's pleading guilty. However, they've agreed on it, so Judge Callahan is really just saying if they need to, they can change it, I guess.
The whole custody thing's just confusing to me. And like I don't know their legal system well at all, but that just seems weird.
I did some research. I did a lot of research. There's things that are very different because I mean, you know, we're two different countries. And once again, this happens in America just as much as it happens in Australia. However, our bail system and our legal system work differently. Very specifically, our bail system. So, but we're going to talk about the real injustice that is the last few weeks of Kelly's life. And Kelly's family is obviously devastated, and they want to pursue an inquest into how this could have happened to their daughter. They want to examine how the system was unable to protect her despite clear evidence that Johnson represented lethal danger to her.
Yeah, I definitely think that's fair to do an inquest into that because we would do the same thing here. Like we would want to understand like why the system did not work.
Right. And then this also is a good reason to do an inquest because the police have already conceded that Kelly's case represents, quote, a failure. And
good.
Here's where I'm going to get hot because here's where I started researching. Law enforcement officers in Australia are employed by all three levels of government: federal, state/territory, and local. So you failed the federal branch of the government, the state and the territory, and the local. You didn't just fail Kelly, you failed her family, you failed the public of Queensland, and you failed to honor the badge you wear. Then you had the audacity to write in official notes that a young woman afraid for her life was, quote, cop shopping. I here would boil the term cop shopping down to trying to get help.
Yeah, like I agree with that. I think that there's a lot of failures here at multiple different levels. But I do also think that it is a good thing that the police are very quickly coming out with this and saying, yes, it is a failure, because that gives more hope that there is the ability to change the behavior and fix it.
I agree.
Because there's a lot of times that you see, like, we didn't do anything wrong. Like, there's nothing that we could do.
I once again, I'm sorry, Australian listeners. I'm not just dogging your police force. I dog ours too. Sam can tell you. But to break it down as I have researched it, and Australian listeners, feel free to weigh in and tell me, like, Kelly, you're wrong. You don't know shit. Write me. Have you heard about this case at gmail.com? In Australia, general law enforcement duties are the responsibility of state police forces, who are in turn responsible to a state government minister, usually a minister for police. These forces carry out uniformed policing throughout the entire state in which they operate. The Northern Territory is the only Australian territory with its own police force. But in Australia's other territories, including the Australian Capital Territory, law enforcement is handled by the federal government, specifically the Australian Federal Police.
Okay. And that makes a lot of sense.
Kelly's case occurred in Queensland, Australia. It is Australia's 6th largest city, the most populous non-capital city, and the state's 2nd largest city after Brisbane. I say all this to highlight that Kelly should have been protected. The Gold Coast, where Kelly pleaded for help, is only 41 miles away from the state capital, Brisbane. Just for your reference and my own, the Commissioner of the Police Service in Queensland reports to the Minister for Police, Mark Ryan. He has held the seat since November 2016. I'd like to share with you a little of what the Queensland Annual Report from 2019 to 2020 shared. All of this should have been in effect as Kelly Wilkinson pleaded for her safety in 2021. Quote, our accountabilities under the Police Service Administration Act 1990, the QPS is responsible for preserving peace and good order in all areas of Queensland, protecting and supporting the Queensland community, preventing and detecting crime, upholding the law, administering the law fairly and efficiently, and bringing offenders to justice. End quote.
Which seems like a pretty typical thing for police. Like, pretty typical list.
Pretty typical, right? Just, it's different than the reason I included that is in America, we have the very well-known motto of the police, which is to serve and to protect. And Australia's, they also have a motto which was changed recently at some point. But I thought their annual report would be a better place because it lists their accountabilities. I'm going to link it in the show notes as well because it lists their accountabilities, it lists their values, it lists everything. Because it's the annual report.
Right.
So at the beginning of April 2021, police charged Kelly's husband, Johnston, with 4 serious domestic violence charges against Kelly. Though Kelly had warned others of problems as early March. So I am unaware of what constitutes. All the article said was serious domestic violence charges.
Okay, so it's like you don't quite know what happened, but
no, we don't.
4 counts of serious domestic violence charges, that's a lot.
Right. All it said was serious domestic violence. So I was like, I don't know what that means. But she was telling people as early as March that this was happening. And so for the April offenses, here's where we're going to talk about a little bit of differences here in our bail system. So for the April offenses, he was given what is called watch house bail in response. According to Brooke Winter solicitors, quote, watch house bail may be granted to you by the police when you are arrested. Once you sign the bail undertaking, the police will release you, and you are bound to attend your next court date. If you do not, a warrant may be issued for your arrest. A person can be granted court bail when they were refused watch house bail.
Okay.
Yeah, he was released from custody, assuming he signed this.
So that's basically like not having bail, or even like the idea of like a bail bondsman. But like you don't pay anything, they take care of it if you show up. There might be a fee in that case. I don't really know how that works, but
exactly. I think for a bail bondsman, you have to pay a percentage of the bail.
Well, I know you pay like to bail out. It's 10% is what you can pay up front to be bailed out. But a bail bondsman, I think, essentially fronts you the money.
Yeah, essentially. Yeah. And then you're bound to pay them back. I think probably with interest. One would.
I would assume that there's fees that come with that. I don't know. I honestly never cared to find out for myself. So.
I agree. I don't care to find out for myself either. But in this case, yes. So it's called watch house bail, but it's basically auto bail. Like this guy signed that he would show up for court, and he just got to go.
I assume that there's like parameters and stuff. Like I'm assuming this was probably his first offense.
Maybe.
Maybe something that like stuff like that where it's like, okay, we'll give you this opportunity. Don't mess it up.
Maybe. Maybe. And maybe if somebody had listened to how badly he was messing it up, this wouldn't be a topic of conversation. Because during the month of April 2021, same month, he is charged with 4 domestic violence charges against her. Kelly attempted to speak to the police regarding serious issues with Johnston, quote, almost every day, according to her sister Natalie Wilkinson in the Gold Coast Bulletin in 2021. Kelly Wilkinson was desperate to tell police that Johnston had, quote, breached the conditions of his domestic violence order, end quote.
In what way?
I do not know, because no one listened. That's why
Like
I don't know.
it never went any further than that?
Wait, I'll tell you where it went.
Because I'm the reason I'm asking is because while I don't agree with it, it depends on kind of how they value how serious whatever she's saying is. And
Well,
in their head, if it was something minor, then that's a different conversation versus if she's going in and saying, well, he showed up at my house and he beat me or whatever it might be. That's what I'm kind of curious.
yeah, I'll let you form your own opinion because I have the records of a couple of her visits to police that are appalling, in my opinion. And if I knew more, I would tell you more. But it was either not released in court how he breached it, or it was never taken down by police.
Because it's
And
also like if she's like, oh, I think I saw him in a car outside, then like they might not take that as seriously, even though it is something incredibly serious and should be immediately looked into. It's just kind of
right,
like, what level do they consider serious
right.
based on what she's telling them?
Mm-hmm. And so the problem is she's telling them and they're not listening because the family said she had sought help almost every day since she first made the domestic violence complaint in late March. So that's nearly every day for 2 months. And this man had been abusing her since late March, and it only took him until April 20th to murder her.
Yeah,
According to her
that's just why I'm
sister,
curious. It's because kind of
yeah,
like, I just, it's hard to make a judgment, at least at this point for me. Like, obviously, I think the police should be listening to her. Like, no matter
yeah.
what, they should be listening. But I'm just curious what she was saying and why they
Well,
didn't.
good news, I have some quotes. According to her sister, when police issued a protection order for Kelly, an officer told the 27-year-old Kelly, quote, "We just need to give him space," end quote.
Oh, I don't like that.
Another of Kelly's sisters, Danielle Carroll, said at that time that Kelly had told the police, quote, "I am scared for my life. I am scared for my children's life. We are not safe," end quote.
Yeah, see, like, if you're saying things like that's serious. You already have 4 domestic violence
Mm-hmm.
charges.
It's, yeah, yeah.
It's not just space. Like,
And
it's not going to get
and
over it with
there's
some time.
exactly like just keeping you in a different house is not going to fix this. And it later in the script, I have some of these escalation things that have been tagged or flagged by the those investigating the case, and we can discuss if we think they contributed to this or not. if we consider, them serious or not. Either way, she told the police officer she's scared for her life and for her children's life and that she's not safe. And what is the officer there for if not to respond to a statement like that?
Right.
And during that same month, April 2021, the month Johnston had been served with 4 domestic violence charges against her, Kelly was turned away from the Southport police station on the Gold Coast. Her family has said that the officer at the station counter said that there was, quote, no one to help with a domestic violence matter, end quote.
So who's supposed to help with a domestic violence matter?
Thank you. I can't fit this into my head. An officer of the law, bound to protect this woman, brushed her off because there was no one to deal with a domestic violence matter? Excuse me, is there any officer in the building?
Right? Just like going to an ER and being like, oh, there's no doctors working today. Sorry.
Yeah, like, oh, sorry, your leg's broken? We don't have any leg guys in today. Like, yeah, what?
No one could do that.
Yeah, is there any officer in the building, then they should be able to deal with the matter. Also, what in the honest and true fuck is this police station open for, if not to, quote, deal with domestic violence matters? And the phrase deal with, quote, I really don't like that. Because that's what was... no one to help. They said there was no one to deal with a domestic violence matter. And that especially makes me angry because it's like, oh, this is just like a fender bender at the stoplight and not a woman's life at stake. Gross.
Right. Like, it's just... Do you have somebody on staff that's all that they do? Are they on vacation? Like... Yeah.
What? Yeah. So Kelly was frustrated with the response, as is this Kelly, the one speaking to you. So Kelly Wilkinson drove to another police station about 15 minutes away in Runaway Bay, hoping, I imagine, someone would wake up and do their job. This is still the same month. This is April 2021, and she has already been turned away from a police station when she is dealing with an unstable, estranged husband who is violating her domestic orders.
Yeah, like...
Yes.
So, I'm just thinking, like, police calls here, and I assume this is, unfortunately, quite normal in most places. I hate to say it, but I think it is. I think a very large percentage of the calls that police go on are for domestic violence.
I think so too, and that's sad.
But it's like, why, like, that should be part of very basic police training.
Exactly. Domestic violence matters should be one of the first things you go over. Is there nobody in the building? Speaking of nobody in the building, according to The Guardian, quote, Guardian Australia can reveal that a police, quote, occurrence report from the time described Wilkinson's actions visiting separate police stations as, quote, cop shopping. Police said internal investigations have identified, quote, no allegations in relation to the term. No allegations? None? So a ghost wrote out that a domestic violence victim was cop shopping? Who was on duty? Who spoke to her? Who right. It was in the official police notes. No allegations.
Yes. Someone put it in there.
Somebody wrote it. And the thing is, it wouldn't surprise me if the same exact thing were coming out of somewhere in America.
Anywhere, really.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, just, again, who was on duty? Who who spoke with her? Like, do you not have CCTV? You're the police station. Like, uh, no
Yeah.
allegations filed. 2 days after Kelly Wilkinson's murder, another person who should be held directly responsible for her death, Brian Codd, Queensland Police Assistant Commissioner in charge of domestic violence responses, was asked if Kelly's death was preventable. His answer makes me want to scream. He begins with, quote, "Wouldn't you love to turn back time?" You've got to be kidding me. You've got to be kidding me. Turn back time? She did everything she could to make it clear to your departments that she was in mortal danger, and multiple officers who should have reported it to you stated instead she was cop shopping, and then no one took responsibility for it.
Yeah, it's like, I'm sure at this point you would like to turn back time.
Yeah,
to
exactly.
actually step in and do what was required.
Exactly. Yeah. No time should have to be turned back if you and your officers had done your fucking jobs. And I hope I see the day where this man is fired and or stripped of his badge and gun. He went on to say, quote, "It's important that we examine to what extent it is a systemic failure. Ultimately, it's a failure. A woman has died. Somewhere along the line, she engaged with the system, with us." End quote. So.
Yeah, like I said before, I think it is good that they're acknowledging that, like, there's a major issue here and it's with their own system. But the wording of that doesn't seem to be sincere.
Yeah, so it's systemic. Yes, it is. It is systemic within your departments, under your supervision, and could have been prevented somewhere, anywhere along the line. She engaged with you? Yes, she did. She was turned away from 2 police stations, and that is documented. Her sister said she approached your officers almost every day. You, in charge of domestic violence responses, chose to ignore her. You chose to turn her back to her home, where this violent offender had already attacked her, and write that she was, quote, cop shopping. You are more than a failure. You are a disgrace, and you owe this woman's family something you can never return: her life.
I'm also curious if this ever did move up the chain at all internally. Like, because she can go in and she can say all these things and they can turn her away, but they can also turn around and say, hey, this was kind of weird. Like, do you think we should look into this? Did it ever go up the chain at any point? And we might not ever know. Exactly. But I think that also is a big sign of who they're putting in front of their citizens.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the internal investigation revealed no allegations. So, is there any just exactly what you said? Is there any documentation of someone saying to someone else in charge, "This seems weird"? Like, or we'll talk about it in a little bit. This is a domestic violence victim, and she has 4 counts against her by the man that she is coming in about. And and you have this man who is the assistant commissioner in charge of domestic violence responses. You could not get more specific. And wouldn't you love to turn back time? Dude, like, nobody should have to turn back time to get back this woman's life. And so As we mentioned before, Johnston suffered severe burns during his murder of Kelly and was, quote, barely able to talk. As such, for months after the incident, the coroner's court has yet to investigate the response to Kelly's pleas for help. The Guardian states, quote, it is unclear whether an inquest will be held, end quote.
I hope an inquest is
Yeah.
held. Like, there really needs to be some investigation into this.
Yeah. And I have looked up a few resources that are talking about it and how much it needs to happen. We'll talk about them too. And first, we're going to talk a little bit more about some noise. Fuck this noise. Johnson's lawyer told the court in 2024 that there were, quote, some factual inaccuracies that remain contested in relation to the background of the relationship, quote, as I mentioned. Though I, again, can't fit in my head what inaccuracies warrant tying a young woman up and burning her alive. I'd love to hear them, defense litigation. Make me understand why this was okay.
Yeah, I wonder if they're trying to go with like a defense of she was also abusive and he had like a mental break. But if he's pleading guilty, I don't see how they can use that defense. Like, they would have to go further and actually have a trial.
Yeah. Yeah, because he's just pleading guilty and they're already talking sentencing dates.
Yeah, that's why it's like, it doesn't make, like, does it matter?
Yeah. So it has to, you can say all day that, oh, there was a, contention in the background of the relationship. Like, I don't care. I don't care what is contested in relation to the background of the relationship. There is nothing there that would make me understand burning alive a 27-year-old mother in front of her 3 children.
Yeah.
I want to cry or vomit. It's awful. It also is known that as in early April 2021, when Johnston is served these domestic violence offenses, he denied them, for which he was charged. So that's why this became April 2021 to just now. Because he denied it. And however, he was made subject to a domestic violence order stemming from these charges. So I can say, in my humble opinion, that the charges were absolutely accurate.
Like, seems like it.
You
Definitely
can deny
seems
them.
Like it.
Yeah, you can deny them, but if they give you a domestic violence order stemming from offenses, kind of sounds like you did it.
Right.
In the days after Kelly was killed, so Johnston is still, I don't know how long, I don't know how many days after Kelly was killed, because we do know that Johnston was caught almost immediately.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how many days. I don't know if he was still in the coma. I don't know when. But in the days after Kelly was killed, Johnston's lawyer told the media, quote, obviously no one expected this to happen, end quote. However, now we're going to talk about what I said before. There's several signs that Johnston proposed a significant and lethal risk to Kelly's life. So, like, what we were talking about before, like, was he just driving by her house? What was happening? So, in addition to her reports to the police station, in what is a sad story that happens here as well, one of these signs that he proposed a significant and lethal risk was, quote, Queensland's Domestic and Family Violence Death Review and Advisory Board has identified separation as a risk factor for domestic and family violence homicides. Separation, or the intent to separate, was identified in more than half of intimate partner killings since 2006. In 58% of cases, researchers found an underlying history of domestic or family violence prior to the murder, though they say this figure is likely much higher due to the well-established understanding that victims of domestic and family violence underreport their experiences to formal services. End quote.
Yeah, it's
So,
unfortunately the most dangerous time, but that's
mm-hmm,
why it's so important
like we
to
said,
have resources to help
right,
you through that. That's
right,
incredibly important.
right. We already called that one out as a potential risk factor. One of the reasons he could have been a lethal danger to her. And now, in a shocking reversal for me, I'm not sure I agree with the Guardian's next lethal risk factor. Their position is Johnston's history as a military veteran is another clear factor that would heighten the risk to Wilkins. Kelly Wilkinson. I don't know that I agree with that unless it was documented that he had access to a firearm. I did read in one article that it was documented he was suffering from mental health concerns and had disclosed suicidal thoughts to counselors. Bearing that in mind, it does sway my opinion more. However, I was unable to find anywhere what services he sought and how much he pursued them.
Well, I definitely think it has the ability to be a risk factor.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen, unfortunately, so many times how PTSD can affect you,
Yes.
and there's
Mm-hmm.
definitely the possibility as a military veteran that he is suffering from PTSD. And
Absolutely.
I think that that's kind of where my brain was going when I was saying earlier, if he's going to attempt to plead some sort of insanity or something, some sort of mental health defense,
Mm-hmm.
or do some sort of
Yeah.
kind of defense for himself along the lines of, well, like, even if it was going to go as extreme of she was abusing me and that's why he was denying the charges to begin with, and then him
Right.
like cracking and ending up killing her could be
Yeah.
related to mental things that he's going through due to his military service. Like, I think it can
Yeah.
absolutely be a factor. I don't see from what you've
Because,
said any signs that show that it was a factor, but I don't think it
yes,
can be counted out.
I agree. That's why I say it sways me a little more once I hear that he had disclosed suicidal thoughts. Because once you've disclosed suicidal thoughts to a counselor, it sort of implies that, oh gosh, I don't want to say that because it's so different for every person, suicidal ideation.
Mm-hmm.
But what I could not find was documentation on what services he sought and if he pursued them at all. That's what I'm interested in. Like, if you
And
had
that might be
suicidal
really private
thoughts,
information. Like, that just may never be
yes, yeah,
released.
that's HIPAA. Yeah, yeah. Here, that's HIPAA. In Australia, that may never be released. But it just said in articles that it was documented he was suffering from mental health concerns. And you're right, we might never know what they were. I I don't know. But that is another point that they bring up, and I agree with you. I do see why it could be because so many of our veterans struggle with PTSD, and depending on when his tour of duty was, complex PTSD, which lasts truly your entire life.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know much about his military record. All I know is that he was a US Marine, and that is very intense. That
Yeah.
that is, I mean, for our American listeners, you know how intense it is to become a Marine. And for our Australian listeners, I'm sure you have an equivalent in your country of, you know, an army veteran, but of special operations, sort of that caliber.
Mm-hmm.
So the status as a Marine, he could have had complex PTSD. I don't know. But it is one of the things that they bring up. And a third thing that they bring up, Angela Lynch, a sexual and domestic violence protection advocate, says that the simple fact Wilkinson was presenting to police with, quote, high levels of fear was also relevant to assessing the risk. Quote, the level of risk was high and should have been recognized, Lynch said. She goes on to say, quote, the charges against him should have been easily accessible to police to undertake a history check very quickly, end quote.
Yeah, no,
And
I
that's
agree
why
with that.
Yeah, that's what I mentioned before. Like, the same person who told her, oh, there's no one to deal with domestic violence matters, you could have punched her name into a computer and seen what was happening to her.
Well, that's why I'm so curious as to how those conversations went. Is because there had to be some sort of progression in that conversation. And if they didn't let her get far enough, or she was struggling to find the words because she's scared, I'm interested to see what that could have been. But because of the protections, we may never know.
Exactly. Yeah. And because he's pled guilty. Like, I mean, essentially now, like,
Unless this inquest happens.
Yes, I hope the inquest happens, because with this guilty plea, we've essentially shut the book on it. And I don't want the book to be shut. And tons of people, I'm going to talk about more of them here, tons of people don't want the book to be shut on this case. And that is beautiful. Lynch said that an inquest was needed to highlight, quote, a range of systemic concerns highlighted by the case, including the decision to grant Johnston watchhouse bail. So we have organizations coming together, like we have the public is, I'll mention it a little bit later, but the public is horrified, like people are coming together. And unfortunately, it's just as systemic there as it is here. And I am happy to hear about these people who are trying, because when it's such a systemic problem, it can look insurmountable. Mm-hmm. So I'm glad Angela Lynch, folks, first person making any sense here. Second person, the Red Rose Foundation's Betty Taylor told ABC Radio, quote, Miss Taylor said she believed the findings of the police review should already have been made public. There is nothing to be gained from 3 years down the track not releasing that. End quote.
Yeah.
So,
that's just Rose information for the public at that point. Like, if they're already admitting that there was a failure, then why not?
And if there was, an internal investigation that resulted in no, the word I'm searching for, no allegations. If there was an internal review that resulted in no allegations, okay, where's the review? What did you do? What happened? And so the Red Rose Foundation is a service in Australia directly fighting domestic violence deaths. So that's another good place that has picked up Kelly's case and won't let it go. And a lot of people have. The Queensland Police Service said in a statement that the Ethical Standards Command had conducted an investigation, quote, as a result of a targeted inquiry from the coroner, end quote. And that it had identified, quote, no allegations relating to the term cop shopping, end quote. And I've given my position on this already, but I'd like to reiterate, if no one wrote it, how did it end up in official police notes?
Yeah, or there's also a difference between no allegations versus we haven't identified who wrote it.
Right.
Like, that would be a whole different statement as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what pings for me and is weird for me is that it was a targeted inquiry from the coroner.
I think that's pretty common in Australia.
Is it?
Yes.
Okay.
I remember I listened to a lot of The Lady Vanishes, and they kind of broke that down at one point. And I think there are times that, like, only the coroner can, like, request an inquest.
Okay. I did not know that. So,
I don't know all the details, but I do remember that from The Lady Vanishes.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't know that. I was like, that is so bizarre. Because here in America, Sam, you would know better than I, coroner standards, but that's not typical of a coroner's position.
No, their job here is very much to examine and, like, do an autopsy and then give that information to the police, and then they can make a determination if there should be charges or more investigation or anything like that.
Yeah. That's a very good summary of it. Thank you for doing that for me. I was like, oh no, I don't know how to summarize the position of coroner because it is broad in the US as it seems to be broad in Australia. And I will remind you again that I'm speaking from a different country with some unawareness of the justice system. I did my research the best I could. If I have misspoken in any way, you can reach out at haveyouheardaboutthiscase at gmail.com with the subject line, Kelly, you're wrong.
It's not always easy to research into cases in other countries. Sometimes it's hard to even research cases in our own country because different jurisdictions and different states are different. And they have different standards and laws and all of that.
Yeah, and there's just so many tiny details that impact. It's dominoes. It's a domino effect. There's so many tiny details that add up to where we're at. And in this case, we're in another country for me, so I'm already a little bit, trying to follow the breadcrumb trail, and understand as best as I can. So the statement also said quote, police were implementing recommendations from the Queensland Women's Safety and Justice Task Force and the Commission of Inquiry into the QPS in relation to domestic and family violence, end quote. I think that's good, but miss me with this garbage. I think a task force of women should not have to assemble to demand safety and justice from the police. The onus of protection is on the police. And now all we can do is unite as women to try to help protect each other because clearly, clear as day, it's not happening.
Like, I have no beef with them implementing recommendations, but I feel like that should have happened a long time ago, and it should continually happen.
Right. Why is this not something that we, in America and in the world, why is this not something that we are continually examining for the safety of all of our citizens? Why? And everybody else thinks the same thing because Wilkinson's murder sparked community outrage because she had sought domestic violence protection from Johnston in the weeks before her death, as we've just gone over. At the time, she was the third Queensland woman to die after allegedly being set on fire by abusive partners in the space of 12 months.
Oh.
Which is absolutely out of control. What on earth is the justice system doing for victims? I ask that not just of Australia's, but of our own. Police did not respond when asked how many officers worked in its high-risk domestic violence team.
Oof.
Three, just in Queensland, women.
Right.
3 women to be set on fire. Like, that, oh, God, it's horrific. And I saw an article that I didn't fully research, so I am sort of going off the cuff here. Apparently it is a very common thing of late in Australia that domestic violence perpetrators are using fire against their victims. And the article had a lot of suppositions in it about why this is happening, but all I can say is that it is happening at an alarming rate.
Yeah, I also think a big part of that is here, what you're going to see more often than not is a gun involved. Mm-hmm. But I think the view on guns is so different in Australia that the percentage of people who have a gun there versus here is a fraction.
Oh yeah, I mean, maybe. I'm not sure. I didn't look into those statistics, and I should have, because it is more common in America, gun violence. But this article that I read, that I'm being sort of unspecific about, I'll find it and I'll link it in the notes. That way y'all can check it out. It was saying that there was just an increase of late that fire is being included. Like, and it's their supposition was that it was so that the man could strip everything away from the woman, because it referenced men using this method against women in domestic violence cases. So, and so, quote, understanding the dynamics of domestic and family violence and seeking protection or providing safe and effective support to a victim survivor will ensure victims no longer live in fear of their abuser, and their children can grow in healthy family relationships free from abuse and violence, the statement said. And I would say, I wonder how we could provide effective support. Maybe listening to women, maybe not turning their abusers free on bail, maybe not saying that no police officers can deal with domestic violence matters, maybe any of the above officials like Brian Codd or Mark Ryan showing up and doing their jobs for victims. All of this should already be in training for law enforcement officials, as we just discussed. It's egregious that Kelly Wilkinson's life was thrown onto a literal pyre of learning to provide victim safety.
Yeah, I feel like we're in 2024 at this point.
Yes.
Like, why has it taken this long?
We've gone through a massive reckoning in police training, at least here in America. Worldwide, I would hope. But I did see some articles that it is a big problem in Australia. And I just feel like, yeah, we've gone through this huge reckoning on training and victim response and lots of things like this. And it's 2024, and this woman should be alive with her children. There are 3 children. And as we said before, Johnston is scheduled to be sentenced this March, and I hope he is given the highest sentence that the Australian court can hand down, which is life imprisonment. There is no death penalty. The worst of all of this is that Kelly's three beautiful children not only witness their father murder their mother, but are now left without both parents, as I hope this man never walks free again. And being that Johnston was a former Marine, I just like to say that though he vowed to protect the United States from all enemies, foreign and domestic, he was and is the enemy against women, against children, the country of Australia, and the general public. I hope he rots in that prison, thinking of the young mother's life who gave him three beautiful children. And I hope he thinks of those children every day as he misses every landmark in their lives.
Yeah.
So, phew. Sam, any final thoughts on this one?
It's frustrating. Like, I understand that crimes, like, they have their own, like, ebbs and flows. They're not always consistent. They change, they evolve. And it is the police's job to move with those changes. And what is mind-blowing to me is this issue is nothing new.
No.
The like, as you were saying, like, maybe the crime of him setting her on fire might be a little more new, but the base part of this crime and domestic violence, that's not new. That's not something that is unexpected. So while I am glad to hear that they're currently saying the right things, they're saying that, like, we made a mistake. We're going to be bringing in domestic violence resources and doing these things. And I hope it all happens. And I hope it happens fast.
Yeah,
but
it better.
I feel like that should have happened a long time ago.
Yeah, they're just like you said, they're saying all the right things. They're saying all the right things, but none of that is going to return Kelly Wilkinson to her children. It should have been day one, page one.
This should have been decades
ago. This will happen. Yeah, day one, page one, this will happen. And just like you said, the fire may be new, but it's not a new crime, and it's sadly not an uncommon crime. Like you said earlier in our episode, it is very sadly not an uncommon crime.
Yeah.
So, Aussie friends, I hope you're still my friends and that I didn't ride everybody too hard. I just, I was blown away by this one. And I hope that, like we say usually, I hope that Kelly can rest knowing that Johnston isn't going anywhere. And that her father, who is alive, and her 3 sisters, and her 3 children can have some measure of peace knowing he's exactly where he belongs.
And hopefully, as much as I hate to say it, but hopefully this is also a massive learning experience for the police system.
God, I hope so. I hope I hope it is something that, like, clean house on those shelves, all the binders that we used to use before, throw them in the garbage, rewrite them, let's redo it. I don't think, like, I'm not saying that the cops are, evil. The cops are to blame. The cops are, the cops killed Kelly Wilkinson. I'm not saying any of that. I'm saying that there should have been response, and there should have been compassion, and there should have been policy. And there was none.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Of any
I agree.
of those things.
Well, thank you all for listening to Have You Heard About This Case? If you liked this episode, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. You can follow us on Spotify. You can find us on Instagram at Have You Heard About This Case Pod, on TikTok at HYHATC, or you can email us at haveyouheardaboutthiscase@gmail.com. Thanks, and we'll talk to you later.